So good morning, everyone. We're going to wait for a couple of minutes so that we have a lot of you with us, and we're going to start. Today's topic is something that I hope everyone finds very useful. I think round two deadlines are now, around the corner, where we have about 8 weeks. And what we'd really like to do is give you tips and strategies so that you can really maximize your efforts over the next 8 weeks. And what we'll do is we'll give you a breakdown of the way you can focus on like really developing each element of your MBA application. So that's the plan, and keep your questions ready. We'll talk about we'll cover a lot of ground today. So without any further ado, let's begin. So, what we're going to talk about today is really how you can work on each element of your application for round two. Round two deadlines, if you're applying to US schools and for other schools as well, is typically going to be in the first week of Jan. Right now, what I'm going to share with you is potential timelines for you to look at. We are also going to give you an idea of the effort that you will have to put in for each element. So we'll break things down for you one by one. Before we start off, let me just walk you through who we are, who the Red Pen is. So the Red Pen is an education admissions consulting firm. We cover a gamut of advisory areas. We cover everything from early advising for students who are still progressing from middle school to high school. We encompass, undergraduate admissions, postgraduate admissions, MBA admissions. We also have specialists who work with parents for boarding school and day school admissions to, coveted institutions. And we also encompass career counseling. Now, we have a decade plus of experience in the area of education counseling. We work with applicants to top universities across the globe, across all areas of specialization. We have a huge alumni list of people who have worked with the Red Pen as their mentors. And very importantly, we have a global team. Our team is spread across about 9 countries. And we are affiliated with a lot of bodies. We are affiliated with, for MBA, we're affiliated, I can talk about the ACAC, which is an association which ensures that we are held to the highest ethical standards. And that is something that is really important to us. We also will help you with understanding schools. We will understand it based on our international affiliations as well. Let's talk about the MBA team. Now, the MBA team, we have a few stats, which we're going to show you now, where we're going to talk about the kind of success that our applicants have seen, which you can see over here. The team which works with applicants is, or they are alumni from, very, again, leading institutions. They have a lot of diverse sector experience, which really helps them understand the pre-MBA, professional trajectory for applicants, and will help them really understand and deep dive into how they can construct their goals, how they can develop their goals, and what is a path that they can consider researching. If you look at the kind of admits we've had over the last 2 years, and there are 2 slides, so we cover all the leading institutions in the US, in Europe, in Asia. And this is something that is consistent year on year. We're very proud of the admits. And now let's talk about today's session. So, hi, my name is Natasha, and I head client servicing and content development for the Red Pen's MBA admission services. I work with clients every year for developing their MBA narrative, and I enjoy counseling in general. So, welcome to today's session. One of the first things that I'd want to talk about before we actually get into what is it that you need to do for round two is just give you an understanding of the perspective that you need to develop around your MBA application. When you submit your MBA application, it is an exhaustive process. There are various elements that you're looking at working on in parallel. But what is it that, what is the picture that these various components really build for an admissions officer is something that you should understand. So when you're building your application, you're focusing on essays, you're focusing on a recommendation from, from people who have worked with you. You are focusing on building a resume, and you're looking at an application form, which is really exhaustive. And, when you are shortlisted, you give an interview, which again, really, plumbs the depths of everything from, the kind of work experience you have, your hopes, your dreams. Why do you want to do an MBA? Why do you want to attend a particular institution? But what is the picture what is a comprehensive picture that all these elements, these application elements really provide? I think it helps to understand it in the form of this pyramid, because what you will understand is, what is your entire application rest on? What is the base of your application? At the end of the day, your application is really going to be based on an evaluation of your academic potential. So things like your standardized test scores, whether you've taken the GMAT or you've taken the GRE, your undergraduate GPAs, the way your performance has been on quant-heavy subjects, these give an admissions officer the confidence that you are someone who's going to really be able to, match up to the kind of rigor that they will expect a student to go through. After that, when they consider your academic potential, the next thing that they will look at is your work experience. Now, the more work experience you have, they have the confidence that you are someone who has managed, diverse work situations. You've looked at challenges. You would have had exposure to things like negotiations, working with cross-functional teams, working with stakeholders, working in a lot of cases with global partners. A lot of this experience is, and, just having experience that evolves over the course of your career will also help them evaluate if you are someone who's really going to benefit from the program, and also are you someone who's going to contribute to the class as well. The brand that you work for matters. If you are working in specific kinds of situations, whether it is entrepreneurship, whether it is working in a large global corporation, whether it is consulting, whether it is a tech-enabled firm, all these kinds of experiences need to add up to the goals that you're developing. It needs to add up to the story that you're building. So the brand matters. The industry matters, and the function that you are a part of will be a critical component in helping them understand how your goals have developed from the exposure that you've had. That brings me to goals. Schools really want to understand what your short-term and your long-term goals are. Short-term, they want to understand where you see yourself post your MBA. Long-term, they want to understand the broad direction that you hope to go in. Schools do understand that long-term goals are, a little broader in nature. They could be a shifting goalpost. Your perspective could change or develop once you are at business school. But for them, what is really, really important is to understand where you see yourself immediately after the program and the general direction you want to head in. Demonstrated leadership is the next component. So when schools look at your candidature, they really want to look at the kind of impact that you have created on the path that you have chosen so far. It is not enough to only look at an MBA degree as a program that's going to accelerate your progress to a particular designation. At the end of the day, you also need to think about where the MBA is going to, how the MBA is going to allow you to magnify the impact that you're creating professionally, perhaps beyond that as well. It could encompass personal and professional areas. But they want to understand how you're thinking of utilizing the MBA degree to magnify the impact that you're creating in the world. After that, they want to understand your extracurricular activities. It is, you may find yourself, wondering whether you need to do more, because as a professional, as someone who is focused on your career, it might leave you with very little time to think of how you want to engage with the world outside of work. But at the end of the day, you need to remember that your extracurricular activities, who you are outside of work, also matters. It matters because it is an opportunity for you to showcase diverse skills. It is an opportunity for you to talk about how you contribute to communities outside of work. So even if you are stretched for time, you do need to think about how you would make time for even one or two initiatives that will allow you to contribute to communities meaningfully. Finally, they're going to look at your fit. Every school has a very particular ethos. And when they evaluate your candidature, yes, they will look at what you want to gain out of the program, but they're also going to look at how you will be a meaningful addition to the community that they have. I'm now going to talk about, the main points of what you need to consider now that you're thinking of applying in round two. When you're attending this webinar, or if you're considering this particular topic, you might be someone who is applying to business school for the first time around. You might be someone who applied in round one and is awaiting results, and maybe you want to just broaden the scope of the schools that you're applying to. You may also be someone who has applied in the past, has not met with success, and now you're saying, okay, I've spent some time since maybe last year, maybe since round one, and now I want to really think about what I need to rethink, what I need to shift perspective on as I want to apply in round two of this particular year. So there are different positions from which you may be approaching this particular webinar, but here are the advantages that you're going to have if you're applying in round two. You've had more time to work on your test scores. If you have been considering applying to business schools, at least, since the start of this year, you've had a lot of opportunities to work on your test scores. So today you're primed, or you're in the ideal position to now think about applying in round two. You've had time to work on your profile. Typically, the decision to apply to an MBA starts maybe about a year before you actually take the plunge and submit an application. So you've had the time through this year to look at your work experience, to look at the kind of projects that you are a part of at work. And today you're hopefully in a position where you're happy with where you stand at work, and therefore you're thinking of submitting an application. You've had an opportunity to really to think about your school research. You've had schools which have, since about June or July this year, have held multiple events, and you've had the opportunity to participate in those events, to attend those events. You've perhaps also connected with school ambassadors. So you're again in a good position to think about the perspective that you've gained from those conversations, from those events, and put that towards your application. You've had time to work on your extracurricular activities. Again, it will look organic if you have been involved in an extracurricular activity over a period of time. So when you're applying in round two, you also will be in a position to demonstrate that fit more naturally. You've also had time to work on additional certifications. If you're in a role where certifications matter, where you can demonstrate deeper subject matter expertise, where you can apply that to your job, again, round two is the round that you should be thinking about once you have that under your belt. I want to now talk about some of the key milestones that you need to think about as you apply for round two, because not only now do you have this bank of resources that you've worked on, but you now need to think about what is it that your efforts will be directed towards in the next 8 weeks. Even if you have given the standardized test, you may be thinking about whether you need to better your score. If you are thinking of bettering your score, you need to think about between now and maybe up to maximum till about the mid of November to think about retaking the test, to think about maybe taking the focus edition of a test. I would personally recommend that if you are planning to apply to round two, you need to set yourself a deadline if you're planning to retake a test or if you're planning to take a test, because focusing on test preparation will impact the kind of effort and time that you can put towards building your application. So set yourself an internal deadline that, you will give the test until this point. After that, you need to focus on, building your application. You need to think about your goals. Hopefully, if you're thinking of applying to business school, you're also working on refining your pitch to business school. So, that can be a process of development. You may be talking to people who you trust. You may be talking to schools, ambassadors, and a lot of that will add to your perspective of why you need an MBA. Ideally, in order to ensure that you're able to place this very naturally and, very strongly in your application, work on refining your goals again during the month of November so that you are in a good space and you're happy with the path that you're choosing. You have the opportunity to also in this time think of additional work opportunities or coursework. And that is something that might extend up to December. But now is the time to really think about if you're thinking of any kind of pre-work or courses that you want to do to really bolster your application. And we'll talk about that. But now is the time to think about doing it. Business school research is going to be ongoing. Most schools, will be pretty aggressive in the kind of events that they're hosting right now. So make sure that you really load November with events and attending those events. Engaging with schools, whether it is through these events or whether these are through individual conversations, either with ADCOM or students or alums, you need to again ensure that November is a month that you really devote to that. Preparing and updating your resume. Now, the resume may be one document that you're really confident about at this point in time, because, all of us have created a resume at, some point in our lives, and we will have an older version in our inbox. However, if you are planning to apply in round two, you need to really dust that resume off and look at it earlier rather than later. Because if there are gaps in your resume, if you feel that your resume doesn't exactly showcase a particular skill to the degree that you would like, you will need to spend November and December either thinking of projects, short-term projects that you can do, or thinking of the kind of work that you've already done, maybe reflect on it and think about the skills that you have demonstrated. And put that into your resume. The resume is a really important document in your MBA application. We will discuss that further, but now is the time for you to reflect on or shore up your resume in time for your round two applications. Storyboarding and writing essays are again going to be a major endeavor. And again, I would suggest that you load the month of November with the bulk of the brainstorming that you're going to do, the refining of your essays. A lot of the other work that you do, which is, the school research, attending events, speaking to individuals, will be elements that will add a lot of strength, a lot of value to your resume. So, it is going to be an iterative process, but you need to ensure that November is a month where you really spend the most time on this particular element. You will need to identify recommenders and develop your letter of recommendation strategy. Now, the reason I say this is because you may have already identified your recommender, but you also need to speak to them, get their consent, really get their buy-in, and ensure that they are available at the time when you need to submit your letter of recommendation. So, you may have situations where you have a set of people identified, but you may have to pivot in case, someone is not available, or, if you feel that there's a better recommender. So that, again, that is something that you need to be thinking of earlier rather than later, because again, the LOR is one particular element that is not within your control. You are depending on someone else to submit it. So again, get that element under control sooner. Subjective questions on your application form. Again, don't start your application form only in the month of December, because you don't want to be surprised by the nature of a particular question. There are schools which will have subjective questions that focus on goals, that focus on background, that focus on the kind of engagement that you've had with the school, at the point of application. They may focus on questions around your future plans, how you plan to stay in a city, the kind of community that you hope to build. And these are smaller questions. They're not really essays, but they are essay type questions. So, if at this point of time, the school that you're applying to, then I would always recommend that, create your account, start, browsing the platform, looking at the questions, and really strategizing how you're planning to answer those questions. Interview prep is something that you will focus on. And ideally, I would not wait until you get an interview invite to start with interview prep. But interview prep is typically something that you're going to be doing in the month of January. So right now, I would focus on all the other elements of your application. What I've done over here is I'm breaking the next 2 months into fortnights. And here's what I think that you need to focus on achieving every fortnight. By the 1st of November, you should ideally be thinking about the list of schools that you're applying to. You should have that finalized so that you can really be very focused in your effort of engaging with schools. You need to register for the events. You sign up for updates on the website, because there will be events that are very broad in nature that you can attend, like an Ask Me Anything kind of event or general information events. But schools will also put out information for more coveted events, smaller events, which tend to have very limited registrations. And if you're not signing up for them earlier, you might miss out on a good opportunity to learn more about your dream school. So register for events early and register for updates. Follow school social media. Now, this is something that I can't stress enough. Schools put out, and admissions, committees put out a lot of information on YouTube, on podcasts. They use various, they have Instagram handles. They may have various clubs that also have their own social media accounts. It is important for you to follow those to start understanding what it's all about and what are the kind of information that they're putting out on social media accounts. These will form a good base for your research, because you will understand what it means to be a student. There will always be videos like a day in the life of a student at X school. There will be club speaker events that they will put up. There will be information around the kind of student profiles that they're looking at. There will be information around the application process. Being aware and following this will mean that you are less overwhelmed later on in the process. Build your network. Now, building your network could be on two fronts. It could be your personal network of people that you know who have attended the school, or it also could be, just reaching out to people on LinkedIn. And all of these processes take time, because, people might take time to get back to you. Someone may not see the message that you've sent them. And, doing that when you're already stressed out about putting your application together, it just means that you have less time to gain value from a conversation. So from the 1st of November, start identifying resources that you plan to tap for expanding your networks or gaining more information. And finally, I think now is a good time to really look at your work profile very critically. Do you have the kind of projects that you really want to? Have you attained a result in those projects? And, you can also reflect on what is the result that you will be able to showcase for a particular marquee project by the time you're ready to apply to business school. So start thinking about various elements of your professional profile, things you can do to bolster it, and what is it that you can show as impact areas at this point in time. By the 15th of November, you would have already done a lot of these. You then need to think about your, more advanced parts of your application, right? You're moving forward. So you need to then think about whether you have the test score that you really want to, because by the middle of November, you should be in a position to go ahead with the test score that you have. You then need to look at your essays, because now is when you're really in the thick of creating your essays, refining your essays. And, that process is going to really be something that will be your path between the 1st of November to about the end of that month. You need to think about extra courses. If you're someone who's not from a STEM course, and, you want to kind of ensure that you're doing additional courses to present during your application, saying that, you've done this additional work. It is something that can make a difference to your profile. So if you're thinking of doing any additional courses to ensure that you're able to showcase to the school that you have you're able to take the rigor of a very quant-heavy course, now is the time to think of taking those courses, and, take that decision at the very outset. Like at the very least, you need to take it now. And, at maybe if you're stretching it, I would say till the 15th of November, you need to have that under your belt. Follow up on conversations. Like I said, a lot of people may not respond to you. It will take you time to really get to a point where you have the depth and the number of conversations that are going to give you a comprehensive picture of the school. Attend events. That goes without saying. You will be attending events through these 8 weeks. deepen your research. Don't rely only on the website. Use the website as a starting point. Use the social media accounts as a starting point to then kind of look at having more directed conversations with the people that you're connecting with. Create your LOR pointers. By the middle of the month, you will have an idea of who's going to be the person who will provide you with a recommendation. And you should create a set of pointers that you can share with the person that will help them to flesh out, they can use that as a base to really flesh out how they want to think about your giving you a recommendation. But it's a good idea to have those pointers ready by the middle of the month. By the 1st of December, so now we're 4 weeks down, we have the last 4 weeks in hand, you should be thinking of scanning and uploading your documents so that you have everything ready. You're not running around at the end of the month. You may realize that you don't have a document. You may realize that you have to approach the university that you graduated from to get spare documents. So, by the 1st of December, you need to be ready with your documentation. You need to finalize your LOR pointers if they've not been done already. 1st December is the last check for that. You need to have your application form under control. So you should have gone through your application form. You should be comfortable with the information they've asked for. And for subjective type answers that you need to give, you should at least have created your talking points so that you can expand on them and adhere to any word or character limit that is specified on the form. Your essay should be close to final. I'm not saying that they will be final because you may be still attending events. You may be still having conversations, but at least you should have the outline of what you want to say. And it should be in a state where you're happy with the messaging and the direction that you have taken in these essays. By the 15th of December, and now we're coming really close to the deadline, you should be reviewing your resume to just ensure that all the work that you've done so far is reflected in your resume. You should check in with your recommenders to see that, they will be able to submit their recommendations in time and, no one's going on holiday, or if someone's facing technical issues, you should check in with your recommenders at least by the middle of December. Review your essays. Your essays by this time should be close to final or final. So you should review it maybe, on the basis of information that you may have received up till that point in time, but just ensure that it's now saying that, what you wanted to say, essentially. A lot of schools this year and over the last few years have focused on video content. So you may be required to submit videos, which could be pre-recorded, either in terms of a single question, or you may have multiple questions that you need to answer in a video format. Now, video formats tend to be a little daunting because we are not really used to looking at ourselves and recording a video where we're speaking for a certain period of time. And it's important for you to really think about what is it that you want to say, create talking points, be really comfortable in your skin while speaking. So doing a couple of practice sessions is a good idea, and you should do that by the mid of December so that you are really comfortable by the time it comes to really recording that final video. By the 15th of December, you should also complete any additional initiatives or courses that you have taken on so that, again, you are very comfortable. You know that you have given the application and additional responsibilities your best shot. A lot of schools will have their submission dates starting, I think, if I'm not mistaken, by around the 4th or the 5th of January. If you are well planned, you should be ready to submit your application latest by the 1st of Jan. Do not wait, and this is something we say every year, but do not wait until the last possible day to submit your application. When you do that, you do run risks of, the site being down, or you facing a technical issue from your side, or maybe you face an issue when trying to make the payment for that application. So be ready to submit your application at least a week before the due date. You may have exceptions to this, but that is the target that you should aim for. Now that we've spoken about what you need to think about in the next 8 weeks, let's look at the elements that you need to be focusing on. There are 8 primary elements that need to be on your radar, okay? The first, and what I've done is I've ordered this in order of importance, okay? priority number one needs to be developing your resume. Your resume is really the backbone of your application because it provides admissions officers with a straight chronology of the kind of progress you've made, the kind of achievements you've had. And that essentially is going to be the yardstick by which they look at everything else that you submit as part of your application. So your resume needs to be on your radar right now. You need to be refining it. You need to be talking to people. You need to be showing it to someone who you trust, maybe a mentor at a later point in time. Do not assume that the resume is a document that's going to be made in 24 hours. You will expect to have at least 3 or 4 drafts of your resume to get it to a point where you're demonstrating impact. You're able to talk about soft skills. You're able to demonstrate values such as collaboration, teamwork. You're able to talk about cross-functional exposure, global exposure, large-scale projects, impact that you have created. All of this takes time. So your resume needs to be on your highest priority at this point in time. The next thing you need to think about is school research. Now, school research is really something that will determine how much you're able to connect with the school and how much you're able to demonstrate interest in being a part of that school's community. Okay, so I've spoken in my previous slides about attending events, registering for events. But at this point of time, you really need to think about what is it that you want to gain through school research. So the first thing that you should do is, like I said, sign up for updates, sign up for the school's social media accounts, start thinking about avenues where you will learn more about the school beyond looking at the pages on the website. The third thing you need to be doing, and maybe I put this as priority 3 because it could be something that you have already thought about. You need to think about the goals that you're developing right now. What are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? Your short-term goal needs to be very specific. You need to think about the industry you want to be in. You need to think about the kind of work that you want to do, the kind of teams that you want to be a part of, the kind of projects that you want to take on post-MBA. When you think about your short-term goals with this level of granularity, you will start thinking about the direction that you really want to take. And this will lead you to think more deeply about why you need an MBA at this point in your life. You will also be able to think about answering the question of why you want to go to this particular school. So developing your goals needs to be something that should be on your radar very, very early on. You then will start thinking about profile development. And that's a natural outcome because if you're going to talk about the kind of goals you want, you need to ensure that your pre-MBA profile provides the admissions officers with enough cues that indicate to them that you are serious about your short-term goal. So think about ways in which you can demonstrate that you are focusing on impact. Think of ways in which you can demonstrate that your interest in a particular sector or a particular company is not just something that is a dream, but is something that you're working towards even as we speak, even as the admissions officer is reading, your application. The next thing you need to think about is standardized tests. And the reason why standardized tests feature so heavily in this particular webinar is because today, if you're planning to apply to business school, you're in a unique position of having access to the current form of the GMAT or the GRE, or even planning to take the Focus Edition. Now, some schools, you need to check with the schools in terms of whether they will accept the Focus Edition scores for round 2. But you have the choice to really work on a format and experiment with formats to figure out which one really plays to your strengths as a test taker. So use your time during this month to take mocks, evaluate your performance, and think about which is the test that you're finally going to go with and submit. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about is essay development. Now, while this might seem like the highest priority on your agenda right now, the essay needs to be based in a lot of the work that you're going to do in the previous 4 or 5 points that I've mentioned. Your essay needs to speak to stuff that you've spoken about on your resume, which could be impact, which could be the kind of professional trajectory that you have. It needs to be rooted in school research and conversations. It will, of course, speak to the goals that you have developed. And if you have taken the effort to strengthen your profile, your essays will reflect that as well. So essay development is also priority, but remember that you cannot develop a good essay at the cost of ignoring the other elements that I've spoken about. The next thing we're going to talk about is really cultivating your recommenders. You could be in a position where you may have really lost touch with someone. You could be in a position where the person that you want to talk to may be very busy, may not have time. So put time on your schedule to really reconnect, to ensure that the person is aware of why applying to an MBA is so important to you. They should have an idea of, or they should at least remember the time that they have, supervised you or been in a position to provide feedback for. So, cultivating the recommenders in terms of reconnecting and engaging in deep conversation is also important over the next 8 weeks. Finally, you need to look at the subjective answers on the form. The subjective answers on the form, if you've put in the effort for developing the first 7 components, subjective answers on the form will not be that much of a surprise. A lot of them will be rooted in very specific information that the school wants from you, which could be related to certain professional choices you've made, job changes that you've made, the kind of background that influences your goals. And answering that will be very easy once you have, reflected on the other elements. Now that we've spoken about these focus areas, and I would in fact recommend that you take a screenshot of this particular screen and just stick this on whatever, board you have in front of you, because you need to look at this every day and just think about which of these elements have you moved forward with today. I think that should be the question you ask yourself every day for round 2. Now let's talk about something in terms of engaging with schools. Now, there were 2 webinars that we've done in the past. One of the webinars that we've done earlier this year is a webinar around how you can do school research. And that is something that we will place in the chat box right now, so you can look at it. It's on our YouTube channel, but you need to think about school research very deeply. Ideally, when you're looking at engaging with schools, you will have 3 kinds of ways in which you're going to engage with someone from a school, okay? But, what do you ask them? What do you gain from those interactions is something that you need to think about in a more focused manner. Now, there are 4 primary pieces of information that, you're going to get. And there are 4 reasons, or there are 4 elements that you need to consider in terms of why you need to go to a business school. You need to think about how a business school is going to enrich your own knowledge, which could be conceptual, which could be an understanding of a particular sector or field. But you need to think about how business school is going to very specifically enhance your knowledge on a particular topic. You need to think about how business school is going to impact your professional toolkit, and how that is going to impact the success that you hope to gain in your post-MBA career. You need to think about the community that you want to be a part of at business school. It's important to not think of the experience as only what you're going to draw from the classroom, but also the experience that you're going to be gaining as part of a very high-achieving, engaged community. So when you're thinking of a fit for yourself with business school, think of the community that you're going to be a part of, what you will gain from them, as well as what is it that you can individually contribute towards that community to enrich it. Lastly, think about the network that you hope to gain. Now, while a lot of people will talk about the network, what will really help your application stand apart is if you're able to really connect what the network that you're hoping to gain at business school, what it will mean to you. What is the value that it will add to you, and how do you hope to also provide value by enhancing that particular network? Do not think of the network as a directory of people that you have access to, but really think about the connections that you hope to gain value out of and also provide value to. Having said these 4 elements, now let's look at the way you should be engaging with business schools. You need to think about the events that you're going to be a part of, and events will be, you'll get the most updates, honestly, on events. And like I mentioned earlier, events can be general information events where you learn more about the school, about what it means to be a part of that school. And these are typically notes that you should be taking so that you can have better conversations with individuals and follow up on some of the points that you're interested in. There will be special events, which could be in-person events, which have limited availability, limited registration. So you need to get in on those early, okay? And there could be various clubs, various student clubs, which also hold events or speaker series. And those are also events that you may be able to register for. So you need to think about registering for those events as well. What you will gain through events such as these is just more information about the school. You will understand the admissions process and the evaluation process perhaps a little more deeply. You will get talking points that you can exploit for later conversations. And you will also realize that it is a platform to ask the questions that you really don't know who to ask, okay? So if it could be something like understanding whether you are eligible for a particular program, maybe you've read something on the FAQ site, maybe it's just wanting to understand who you can contact for a certain kind of information. Use these events to really get answers to some of the questions, the very basic questions that you have. And don't ever feel embarrassed about, is it like, does it sound like it's too basic? Does it sound like something I should not be asking? It is a platform for you to gain the confidence by asking your questions. The second kind of interaction you're going to have with schools is really with student ambassadors or with admissions officers. So these will be designated spots. They are individuals who will be able to answer questions that you have. And the school will also, if it's student ambassadors, will have dedicated pages where you can even browse through the student ambassadors and maybe connect with someone who shares interests with you or shares a professional path with you or has the sector exposure that you feel that you would connect with the most. So, look at using these connections meaningfully and connecting with them early on, because remember that, designated spots will also have projects, assignments, internships, and other meetings and responsibilities. So start connecting with them earlier, but go through this and really use the information, that broad information that you have about the school, to gain more specific information. Okay. Remember that these are very valuable interactions, and you should think about what is it that you want to ask these particular spots. Use these conversations to get more detailed information about the resource or multiple resources that the school has on offer. Or maybe you want to understand more about the community, and these will be the individuals who are best placed to give you that information. You can also have more customized conversations, because in a larger event, information that is curated for those events tends to be more broad-based. It tends to focus on a very heterogeneous crowd. When you have one-on-one conversations, you can really customize what is it that you want to ask, the information that you want to gain, and gain more value out of that. These individual connects are also very important, because, when you talk to an ambassador about your goals, they may even give you suggestions in terms of how the school can help you for that goal, or they may even give you a completely new line of thought. Whatever that might be, it is worth deepening those conversations so that you understand how the school is really going to be an important component of your journey towards being where you want to be in 3 to 5 years' time. The last kind of conversation that you will have, it will be with school alumni, and these may not be as easily available, as events and ambassadors, which tend to be more readily available as resources. When you connect with alums, you will remember that you may have to do this through LinkedIn. The chances or the response rate through a cold connection might be lesser. So you may have to send out more in-mails to get that information or to make that connection. You will have to rely on your personal network. And a lot of times that means going through the friend of a friend. And that can be it can be time consuming. It can take a lot of follow-ups, but you need to again start that early on, because these are very, very valuable resources. You may also see alumni as speakers at events, and you may connect with them after those events. That is also a valuable way to make those connections. Alumni are important because these are individuals who have really gone through the grind, and they're at a certain path in their post-MBA career, at a certain stage of their career. And you will be able to understand the value of the school's network in a very personal manner from these particular conversations. You will understand how your post-MBA career development, what will it look like? What are steps that you can take post your MBA to ensure that you continue to stay on the path that you want to be on? You can also find out from alums what it means to be an alumnus of a particular school. How do you stay in touch with the school? What are the lifelong learning opportunities a school can offer you? And these are, again, very, very important resources for when you're building your pitch, talking about why you want to be at X school at this particular point in your career. Let's now focus on potential roadblocks. Now, as you have 8 weeks in hand, effectively, there are certain there are certain situations which might really derail the entire process of your application, and you need to be cognizant of that so that you can plan ahead of time. The first and most important, challenge will be managing your time. Now, what you don't want to be in is a situation where you leave everything for the month of December. You tell yourself that I'll have leaves in that month. People tend to take a lot of time off at the end of the year, so there will be less work projects and less deadline pressure. But this doesn't really work out. Because if you look at the sheer amount of things that you have to do, leaving a lot of things till December and making an assumption that that will be a time of less stress is not necessarily a great option. So, if you feel that there are work schedules, you need to think about how you're going to prioritize time. My specific advice would be, even if you cannot set yourself a target of devoting maybe 4 to 5 hours on your application every week, you need to figure out a time schedule that works for you. Maybe you are someone who says that 3 times a week, I can dedicate maybe an hour or an hour and a half to my application. But have a schedule, have a plan in mind, and don't wait or don't make an assumption for having time at a future point in time. Okay. And December is really the time where if you have a question, you may find a critical contact point maybe on leave. Someone may not be available. So you don't want to take that chance. Start blocking periods of time from now so that you have a consistent, dedicated effort that you are making on your application. Another potential roadblock could really be your school research, because you might find yourself in a situation where you've reached out to 10 people, no one's come back to you, and those connections have not been made. You may have only attended a certain number of events, and that you may yourself feel that that's not sufficient. So you need to kind of remember that response rates will be low. You are kind of asking people to take time out of their day to make time for a connection. So you may have to double your efforts on that side. If you start seeing that you're getting very little information or you have made very few connections, you will have to double down and then start looking at various other avenues where you can deepen your school research. So make time for this, because understanding the school resources is really going to be key to your application. Test scores. Now, test scores can be a roadblock if you tend to not be a great test taker. And that is, something that, you should not look at as, something that disqualifies you from applying to a good school. But you really need to figure out the test format that works for you. So if you feel that you're struggling with a particular test or a particular format of the test, look at experimenting so that you don't find yourself in a situation towards deadlines where you don't have the test score that you feel best represents who you are. You need to make time for test prep, and that is something that you need to bake into scheduling time for the next 8 weeks. And you really need to figure out what is the most favorable test format for you. I think that is half the battle. So take time to do that. Recommenders, like I mentioned earlier, someone may not be available, someone may not remember may come back to you and say, hey, listen, I'd love to give you a recommendation, but I'm not sure I really remember too many details about the time that I was supervising you or that I was interacting with you. So, you may have to pivot and look for someone else as a recommender, which can be difficult because maybe you don't want to tell too many individuals that you're applying to business school at this point of time, or maybe it's a very sensitive conversation within the organization. So, keep time, because you should actually create a bank of people that you would consider as recommenders, maybe in order of priority. And then not be in a situation where you're scrambling if for any reason someone is not available to give you a recommendation. One of the things that I'm also going to talk about is etiquette, because a lot of the things that you're going to have on your radar will require you to pivot very quickly between different kinds of research or conversations. A lot of the deeper information that you gain from a school is typically centered on very personal connections that you make during this period of time. And you will find that some of these people can become your champions. You may have people who start believing in your candidature, who start cheering you on. And that is a very heartening feeling, because it means that someone who has a very limited perspective on who you are also believes in the value of what you're setting out to achieve. And having these champions having these connections can really have a transformative effect on you in the long term. So it is important to ensure that you nurture the connections, that you nurture the conversations that you've had. And for that, there are 4 very basic tips that I'm going to give you, but I'll expand on them because it is possible that trying to manage so many things at once, you may miss out on this particular element of nurturing conversations and individuals and connections. So always remember these points in every interaction that you have, okay? One, when you interact during an event or during a personal connection on a video platform, ensure that your camera is on. The worst thing you can do is have your camera off because it indicates to the school, or it rather makes the school wonder whether you're really interested in the information that they're handing out or the conversation at large. It is possible that a lot of the conversations or the events might happen at times where, you may be half asleep. It could be at a very, very early point in the morning. But ensure that your camera is always on, that you're alert, that you're dressed in business formals, and that you engage and ask questions. The first few events you attend, it might be a learning process. You may not really know what is it that you want to ask someone, but you'll have enough exposure to the questions and how people are using the platform to start forming your own questions. But always engage on events where you attend. Create connections. Every opportunity that you have to engage with someone is an opportunity that you should consider following up on. Demonstrate interest by asking questions and, really ask meaningful questions. The question you should not be asking is, what did you do to get into business school? The questions you should be asking is what it means to be a part of the community. What are the kind of projects that they work on? You should ask them for advice. As a mentor, what do you feel are things that I should expect when I come on campus? What are the stressors? What was the most memorable part of being a part of this community? These are just a few questions, but they are questions that really build on the experience of being at business school and will be very valuable for you to form a very holistic perspective of what it means to be a part of that community. Express gratitude. Now, this might seem like a natural ending to a conversation. You might thank them for their time, but you need to ensure that every engagement you have with a speaker, with a student ambassador, with an alumnus, you do make the time to thank them for the time that they have spent. You can always send them an email note. If you have an email address, you can thank them in person, but make the time to always ensure that they come out of the conversation knowing that they have used their time to really add value to someone and their aspirations and their ambitions. So expressing gratitude, sending thank you notes is a very, very valuable activity that you should not miss out on. Be respectful. Now, a lot of the conversations that you have will be across time differences, will be across time zones, will be across, geographies, will be with people who have very, very busy schedules, whether it's your own schedule or theirs. And, making time might sometimes be, a very difficult prospect. So be respectful of the time that someone has allocated by being prepared for the interview or being prepared for the conversation. Ensure that the questions that you ask someone are not questions that you would easily find the answers to with the Google search or with a quick glance at the website. So be aware that if you're going to engage someone in conversation, you have enough talking points to really gain value out of the conversation and build on the experiences that that particular individual has had. I think the point that I've mentioned in italics at the bottom of the screen is something that should guide every conversation that you have with someone. You need to always demonstrate that you are an engaged community citizen, that you are someone who's not only looking at deriving value, but adding value to conversations, to communities, to people, to juniors. And that is something that is going to hold you in really, really good stead in every interaction that you have. I think with that, I've finished what I had to say. I think there are quite a few questions which I can see. So I am going to look at this. Okay, so I think someone has said, what if I haven't completed 3 years of work experience at the time of applying? This is honestly a very subjective call. 3 years is a good guideline, but there are individuals we've worked with who have had about 2.5 years of work experience at the point of submitting their application. what you need to really consider at the point of applying to business school is how are you going to show the business school that you have worked on enough initiatives or projects to really show them that you have an understanding of the complexities of professional life and of delivering results. So if you feel you're at a point in your career where you can demonstrate that to the school, that is a point when you really need to be thinking about, answering that question of why MBA and why now. So really think about that question when you're applying. 3 years is not set in stone, but you need to think about the value that you're going to gain and how you're going to talk about it. So 3 years is a good benchmark, but we do have individuals who have applied at 2.5 years at the point of submitting their application. The next question is, what if I've already have an MBA from a regional business school in India? So this is a good point, and we do have individuals who do apply for a second MBA. Two things that you need to keep in mind: there may be some schools that do not accept someone who has an MBA, so you need to check the FAQ section of the school's website, and you need to inquire with the school because some schools do have a policy around that. If they do accept someone for a second MBA, then what you need to be asking yourself is, what is the value that you would derive from a second MBA degree? If you have done an MBA from a regional business school, from an Indian business school, you may want to think about the gaps that still exist and whether an international MBA or a second MBA is really going to address those gaps. So that should be what you reflect on at this point in time. Please also guide students who are in final year undergrad for MBA without work experience. If you are in this position, you need to look at deferred MBA programs. These tend to be highly coveted, and it would mean that you would be gaining an admission with the option of joining the class 2 years hence, and you would be expected to have full-time work experience for that period of time. So you should look at inquiring for deferred MBA programs, and also then think about the timelines, because you will only be able to apply for those programs while you are in final year. The minute you finish your final year and you're applying for an MBA, then you would not be considered for that particular pathway. Okay, the next question I have is from Rakshit, who comes from an aviation background from India, and you want to join corporate strategy in a major US airline short term. But I've heard that only some airlines sponsor H-1B. Okay, so due to this, I feel ADCOM might think that I may end up jobless post-MBA. If that is true, does my short-term goal hamper my chances for selection? Rakshit, honestly, there's a wide variety of business schools, and what I feel that you should do is really speak to ADCOM in terms of evaluation. Ask for an evaluation of your profile and have an open conversation around your goals. You will be surprised. A lot of these conversations can give you good food for thought and can also help you decide whether you want to pivot your goals too much. I don't think that you should make an assumption before you speak to someone from the school. So my advice would be go for a profile evaluation, or at least explore the option of connecting with ADCOMs across a range of schools, okay? And then take that decision. I think it will be best if the school is able to put your mind at ease. So take that option. Okay, final year undergrad for the MBA, I think I've answered this. How do we access school admissions events in November? Where should we look for them? You should look for them on the school website. So I'm assuming with this question that you haven't looked at the school website, but every school website will have an events page. You also have the option when you explore a school's website for signing up for updates, and you should do that. And you should regularly track their events page so that you can see events. A lot of times, there could be in-person events. A lot of schools have started doing events across different countries. So, look out for those. And then, the earlier you can register for them, the better, because you can add it to your calendar and not miss out. Okay. I'm hoping that if the screen is not visible, you're going to be able to look at the recording and you have been able to hear the information. So I think that should help you. What do you mean by include connections? I'm not really sure which slide this is for, but I hope I've answered it. If not, you can just give me a little context again. Is 710 a good GMAT score for the top 20 schools, or should I consider giving it again? Now, this is really a loaded question. There is a subjective element to it. As an Indian applicant, yes, as an international applicant, rather, you do need to have a good GMAT score. It really depends on the school that you're applying to and also the overall strength of your profile. If you are in a position to increase your score and you have the bandwidth and the time to prepare for it, then you can consider giving it again. However, is 710 necessarily a bad GMAT score? Honestly, the school will always look at it in the context of your overall profile. If you are in a role where you're really able to demonstrate complexity and scale and impact, they may consider 710 as not being a barrier, but your GMAT score is not going to be the reason why purely the reason why you are selected or rejected. But yes, it is better to aim for a slightly higher score if you have the bandwidth to give it again. Otherwise, I would also focus on bolstering your profile so that the GMAT score is not the only defining factor. What kind of extracurricular should I be focused on if I work in social development sector? I'm planning to apply next year. You can think about how you're utilizing your time outside of work. Now, extracurriculars don't necessarily need to mean that you focused on working with, any kind of disadvantaged communities if you're doing that as part of your job. But you do need to have passion projects or ways in which you engage in self-development. So whether that means that you're training for a marathon or coaching a football team for kids or, really engaging in a group sport or putting together a team of people who travel the world. At the end of the day, you need to demonstrate that you have an interest or you have a side to your personality which you give expression to. And I think that is how you need to think about extracurricular activities, given that you work in social development and given that, a lot of people will tend to look at CSR activities as extracurriculars. That's not necessarily how you need to view this. I already have 9 years of work experience. Am I irrational in considering an MBA at this moment? What are the best ways to get my management education done? No, you are not. I would in fact say that you are at a position where you can consider whether you want to do an executive MBA based on your experience or you want to do a regular MBA. You might find that a European MBA might suit you. European classes tend to have a lot of, a large part of the cohort with about an average of 6 to 7 years of work ex or even higher. And we have worked with applicants with close to the kind of work experience you have. So yes, schools do value the experience that you're going to bring to the classroom. So I would definitely say that you should consider either an MBA or an executive MBA based on your profile. And do consider European schools as well. They are very rigorous. They do value the experience, and you will find larger part of the cohort with a significantly higher amount of work experience. So if someone gets laid off and is applying to business school, there'll be a gap in employment. Would that hamper one's chance? It won't, if you are able to sufficiently explain the situation. And also, even if you are laid off, you need to think about how you are engaging your time. You can think of, and I'm just going to give you suggestions. You'll need to see what is applicable to your particular life situation, but consider doing pro bono projects, consider involving yourself with certain causes, but do not be in a position where you are unable to explain that even though the circumstance that caused you to be without a job at this point is out of your control, you should not be in a position to say that you're doing nothing about it. Schools will value that you're utilizing your time and how you're utilizing your time. So consider those options. Last slide, while chatting with alums, you mentioned about, you include connections would primarily be that you need to think about including personal connections as well. You should explore not only cold leads, which are people that you don't know, but also start looking around within your own connections to see whether you have people that you can connect with. And this sometimes is can be something that we miss out on because, someone will say, oh, you didn't tell me you were applying to business school. I could have connected you with someone who has studied at that school. So, start thinking about the people that you want to talk to, that you're applying to business school, people who will have connections with individuals that can add value to this conversation. Okay, I think some questions have been repeated, but I've answered them. Okay, I have a GMAT and GRE score, one recent and one from a couple of years ago. Do I need to disclose that I have both while applying? Do I have the liberty of choosing? You can choose, Mohana, which one you want to send across. If you have already sent that score to the school, they will have that on file. But if you've not, then you need to choose which one you want to send to a school that you've not already sent it to. How many schools should we to apply to at max? And at the same time, how to look at time per school while applying? Now, I love this question because you need to, this answer varies for different people, but I would typically say apply to only as many schools as you have time to do research for. And that benchmark to me would be anywhere between 3 and 5 schools at this particular point in time, like standing on 1st of November, that's realistic. If you are doing more schools, then you need to really have a robust plan of action. You will find that once you do a couple of schools, you will find the rest of the schools easier to put information together for. The amount of time that you will spend per school will primarily then be on the research that you're doing, because some of the bigger picture questions, like why do I need an MBA? Why do I need an MBA right now? What are my goals going to look like? Will pretty much be in a common zone across the schools that you're applying to. So yeah, you should be thinking about realistically, how many schools can you devote time to attending events and doing conversations and really gaining information for. So that would be my benchmark. And I would say 3 to 5 schools is a realistic estimate. If you can do more, then I think that's great. Please share tips on how to cover if there's a career break in my profile. I started in 2016, worked till 20. Since 2020, I'm on a career break. I have my GRE scores ready. Okay. So what you need to do is you need to think about what you've done since 2016. So that might not seem very obvious right now, but you do need to show continuity. If you're serious about applying to business school, think about how you've used your time since 2020. Because otherwise it is not really acceptable to business schools to have someone with such a long career break. You will have done something, I'm pretty sure of that. I think just think about all the causes or all the mentorship or other activities that you have been a part of, but you will need to write an optional essay to business school to explain to them what is it that you have been doing since 2020. Okay, great. So I think I have answered all the questions that we had. And the links that I mentioned to the YouTube videos that we've also posted in the past. One is around, it will be extremely helpful. It's around business school research. The second extremely helpful webinar is around how to build your resume and your LinkedIn profile. Your LinkedIn profile, while it's not something that is a critical part of the application components you need to submit, it is a good part of, it is something that anyone who you're planning to reach out to through your network or through emails will look at. So we've done a webinar around the factors that you need to consider. So I think both these are in the chat box. They're very, very useful. And if you are thinking of applying in round 2, I think you should spend this weekend listening to them. So I think they're very useful resources. Great. So I think with that, if you do have any further questions, you can reach out to us and, we'd be happy to help you or have a conversation with you. So thank you for attending today's webinar. And I really hope that you are deriving value out of it. And I wish you all the best in your round 2 applications. So with that, thank you.